Drop it. All right, welcome to Power Panel. Michael Shure, Cenk, Uygur, John Iadarola with you guys. Epic Junior, non-epic. Okay, so
my 7th most hated nickname you've given me.
Epic Junior?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's only when I'm around that you're called that.
That is true. That's true. Could you go?
Yeah, I'll leave.
Yeah, I'll try to push it to 10 by coming up with 3 other awful nicknames for you. Lots of madness as usual. We're gonna start with Trump madness in a little bit, and then we've got Pat Buchanan madness. We've got Ben Carson. We make big ones, we make little ones. The Elizabeth Warren gets a scalp. The Koch brothers try to fight back. So it absolutely jam-packed. Oh my God, I did not mean that.
You did. You just
okay, I swear to God, I know I'm the king of buzz, but that one I did not intend. The CEO of Wells Fargo.
That would get you fired off of local radio.
Yeah, apparently, right? Oh, remember that guy? I don't know if you guys remember. He accidentally said something terrible about Condoleezza Rice. I think he was a conservative, so he really didn't mean it.
Right.
And then he was like, "Oh my God, I am so sorry, so sorry." And he did not come back from the break. They fired him in mid-break.
Is that where that soundboard clip is from?
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I thought that was like a comedy show or something.
No. He really.
I've never known that one.
Yeah. Anyways, all right. So that happened.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then the Koch brothers try to fight back against her. So we will cover that as well. At 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern tonight, live interview with Tulsi Gabbard. So don't miss that. That'll be, I think, our 6th presidential candidate on the Young Turks. And then
you've had 6?
Yes.
Damn. Okay, we're gonna have to catch up on the damage report.
This weekend, I'm interviewing Ilhan Omar in the studio. You guys are gonna see it a little bit later next week, but that's gonna be amazing, so check that out as well. Right now, we're currently planning on showing it to you guys on Thursday of next week. So lots of great guests coming into the Young Turks studios, so that's fun. All right, John, let's get started. We got a lot of show.
Okay, let's break it down. Last night, Donald Trump had a big rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he's in a good mood. And what does Donald Trump do when he's in a good mood? He viciously attacks people fleeing from violence in Central American countries that have been destabilized in no small part thanks to the United States. And here that is.
You have people coming up, you know, they're all met by the lawyers and they come out, they're all met by the lawyers, and they say the following phrase: I am very afraid for my life. I am afraid for my life. Okay. And then I look at the guy. He looks like he just got out of the ring. He's the heavyweight champion of the world. He's afraid for it. It's a big fat con job, folks. It's a big fat con job.
I think he just came up with his 2020 re-election slogan.
That's right. To be fair to Donald Trump, if anyone knows about big fat con jobs, it's Donald Trump. And I'm pretty sure the size of your body is not relevant if someone is threatening to kill you with a gun.
Yeah.
Nor do I think that Donald Trump actually looked at anyone at the border and thought they looked like a heavyweight fighter. Nor does any of this make sense. And of course, these days you kind of leave it unmentioned with Donald Trump because you assume he's a monster. But the lack of empathy for people fleeing violence and even if you don't think it's violence, just incredible poverty to the point that they would put their kids through that perilous track because they think that staying is worse for their kids and for their lives. And of course, for Donald Trump, that's just a punchline.
It's also like it's a theme in conservative Republican circles that has been around for quite a while, which is that because there may be a few people who are not necessarily in danger who are coming across the border, that means that everyone who really is should be punished for it. It's just like Social Security. Yes, there are Social Security cheats. There are people who take advantage of the Social Security system. There are people that take care of the welfare specifically. And those welfare cheats are who they are, but they're people who desperately need it, who are trying to live right and need it, and to punish everybody because there are some cheats. That's a consistent theme in conservative Republican thought over the past 3 decades.
I just want to add 2 quick things to that. Sorry, John. One is that's why we have a process to figure out who's telling the truth and who's not, and we don't want to take in asylum seekers that aren't really asylum, that actually should get asylum, right? And we can say, wow, that costs money. Yeah, so does our criminal justice system. Or we can just put everybody in prison and not give them trials because it costs money. No, we have systems in place to deduce who's telling the truth, who's not, who's right, and who's not. And if you get rid of those systems, well, then you have chaos and lawlessness and utter cruelty, which, come to think of it, all those things probably inure to the benefit of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and what you were describing, and there's other examples too, is the get out of thinking free cards that conservatives use every day. So if some people aren't actually fleeing violence and just were willing to risk violence and being robbed or raped or murdered on the way here, then bar them all from entry. If one person falsely reported a rape, then rape doesn't exist. If one person made up a hate crimes don't exist, and racism is dead. That's how they think, because it's not true, it's not reflective of reality, but it takes a lot less thought and energy to go about your day that way. And so what he just did there was, if he has any skill, it's that he knows his audience. And his audience doesn't care what's actually going on at the border. They know as little about the asylum seeking process as he does. But he knows if I just imply that these non-white people are cheating the system, my audience is really gonna like it. It's gonna go over quite well. And so he was very blatant in the way he was mocking asylum seekers. And leave it to CNN Politics to tweet about it this way: President Trump appears to mock and question the legitimacy of asylum claims. It's a big fat con job. Which does 2 things. One, it pretends that we don't know that yes, he is mocking. He just appears to mock. Who's to say? And also repeats his big line, it's a big fat con job. So Trump fans get to see that and maybe they'll retweet it. Trump has plausible deniability. CNN Politics doesn't get yelled at. That's the way things have developed. I mean, how many years into the Trump thing are we? And we're still giving him the benefit of the doubt on attacking immigrants?
Yeah, now one part of that they apparently miscalculated is CNN Politics doesn't get yelled at, because here we are, kind of yelling at them. Now look,
by right wingers, I mean.
Yeah,
they're a lot meaner online.
Of course, and they generally don't care at all if progressives yell at them, but nonetheless we will. But look, I get it. It's not the most egregious example of false equivalency or mainstream media bending over backwards for Republicans, but you saw the clip. He didn't appear to mock them. He clearly mocked them.
Yeah.
And it's not like it was a tough borderline call, right? It's Trump. You saw it with your own eyes. They're afraid of Republicans. They're afraid of Trump.
Yeah, he pretended he was them, and he used a voice to be. That's mocking. That's the only thing that mocking is doing that. And maybe I'm being too hard on this particular tweet. I guess I'm just noticing it more and more. We talked about on the damage report earlier today, an NBC News tweet. It was about the judge striking down 2 of the Medicaid work requirements. And the way they said the tweet was ending Trump's marquee attempt to push the poor to self-sufficiency. Like that's what the work requirement was. It was finally gonna get them to be self-sufficient, those lazy bastards. Is that what it was? But that's NBC News. It wasn't Breitbart. It wasn't Drudge Report.
Yeah.
And so that's what we get. But look, so he's mocking these people. He's pretending that the threats of violence, the murders and rapes and domestic violence and political persecution and killings based on homophobia and things like that, trans people being targeted in these countries and killed is all fake. We could go through the stats, we've done that many times. I just wanna read one bit of a case study of one individual who fled. This is from an area inside of Mexico. So at one point for 3 months, members of a criminal group that Avelia thinks they were associated with a particular cartel had been calling her to demand that she pay them about $500. They also tried to get her oldest son to sell drugs at his school. When Avelia and her son refused, the group threatened to kill them. She took their warnings seriously because 4 years earlier in 2014, the group had started threatening her husband, a van driver. One day as he was traveling between their village and a nearby city, members of the group stopped his van and killed him. They cut his body into pieces, she said, making a sawing motion at her wrists and knees. She said they left the pieces of his body and his burned vehicle along the highway. She said she was too afraid of retribution to report the crime. And when they began threatening the rest of her family, she fled. Because that's what a reasonable person does when faced with threats like this.
The big fat con job.
Yeah. as the most powerful person in the world would label it.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so that's the situation we have in this country where about 40% of the country doesn't care. They're like, well, that's inconvenient. If you showed it to them and that person was in their living room, I don't think most of them are monstrous enough to go, oh, I don't care if your kid gets chopped up. No, I don't think so. But their actions are the same when they purposely choose to ignore all those stories and say, I don't want to hear your story. I don't care if your kid's gonna get chopped up. I don't wanna hear it. The president tells me you're all liars. I'm done with it. You're all liars. And of course, Trump
and criminals. And this is, in point of fact, a kid who is trying hard not to be a criminal, who is saying, no, I won't sell drugs. And yet the same applies to this kid in the eyes of the president and his administration.
Yeah, and to circle back to the whole him not understanding thing, he announced, he sort of implied it there, but he's given more details since that rally that he is considering shutting down the border with Mexico next week because there are more caravans coming, and if they won't stop them, we'll shut down the entire border. And it'll be great, it'll stop drugs and everything, he says. I mean, he doesn't care about the specifics of this. He needs to keep threatening to shut down the border to keep people that vote for him scared of what's going on at the border. But he also said this, and this is just so deliciously stupid. He said, Mexico is gonna have to do something, otherwise I'm closing the border. I'll just close the border. And with a deficit like we have with Mexico and have had for many years, closing the border will be a profit-making operation. Because he thinks with a trade deficit, the US is a company. Money's going out, less is coming in. We'll make a profit by not having trade with this country. Which is, it's so mind-bogglingly stupid that you would imagine this is one of the things where he's just sort of in over his head. But he's got to know that that's not what a trade deficit is. Nobody in the audience understands it.
I don't think he has to know that. I disagree with you.
He's a businessman. That was the whole thing.
I think that's a big fat con job. That's the big fat con job here, is that he's not really a businessman. He's a failed businessman. And I think things that we've been learning just this week are showing just how failed a businessman he is. And I mean, he's a businessman who's gone bankrupt numerous times. That's somebody who has no clue. So I disagree with you. I would give some presidents the benefit of the doubt on that, and some people, but I don't think he knows.
Yeah, and remember he has no ability to learn because he's so thin-skinned. If anyone tries to correct him, he'll get hurt. He'll yell at them, and he might even fire them. So no one ever corrects him inside his own administration. 3 different times he said that our stealth fighters can't be seen by the naked eye. No, they are stealth fighters because they can't be seen by radar, you idiot. But he keeps going out there and saying it over and over again because no one is willing to walk up to the president and go, Mr. President, I'm sorry, but you're stupid. They actually can't be seen by the naked eye. They're not Wonder Woman's jet. Right? So like they don't have to call him stupid, but like any kind of correction, but he doesn't want to hear it. So he said on a number of occasions, especially with China, that the trade deficit, well, if we stop trading with them, then we make money. Of course that's not true. That's not within miles of true. But he's too stupid to know it, and everybody else around him is too scared to tell him.
Yeah. On that plane thing, I've heard you talk about that before, and you speak with a lot of assurance on that. But if the planes were flying around invisibly, how would you know?
You know what? Complete and total exoneration.
Yep.
Okay, well, why don't we take our first break? When we come back, he also, look, obviously renewable energy is one of the most important issues to me, pushing for a policy that emphasizes it, and he's gonna talk about wind power with about as much knowledge as he has in trade deficits.
Okay, the wind power line is awesome. Don't miss it, we'll be right back. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks. I love these. They're not tweets, they're comments in our member section. Eclectic Miss Shalania says, CNN says that Trump appears to mock asylum seekers. I say that CNN appears to be unable to state the obvious facts because they are afraid of telling the truth because it might not be seen as politically correct.
That's 100% accurate.
No, it only appears accurate.
Sorry, I appear to be corrected.
Okay, we can keep doing this all day. All right, Fort Costa Rica writes in.
That was the winning line right there.
Oh, I just got it.
Yeah,
I'm really slow today, man. Okay, Fort Costa Rica writes in, I'm losing my sanity trying to make sanity out of Trump's insanity. We're right there with you, brother. And now 2 great points about projection. So we mentioned Trump saying big fat con jobs projection. There's about 1,000 tweets saying the same thing. Okay, that's great. But get a load of this. Gabby Merida says, I was afraid for my life is the excuse given by every single cop who has wrongfully shot a person of color. So you want to talk about a con job about like, oh yeah, this guy's like built like a heavyweight champion. He's got guns, tasers, handcuffs. He's got a whole army behind him. And he says, I'm afraid for my life as he shoots an unarmed guy. Hey, that's Cenk appearing to mock cops who kill unarmed black men. Okay.
That is a devastatingly good point.
It is, Gabby. That's like the point of the week. That's excellent.
Coming in also at the very end of the week too. She almost didn't have the point of the week.
Yeah, and I don't know who it would have been otherwise. So there were a lot of good points this week. Anyway, Chris Durant says, didn't Trump wuss out of Vietnam because he was afraid for his life? Indeed, he would know a con job about being afraid for your life.
That's true.
Sorry, Gabby, you lost. He's beating you now.
Man, you had it for like 15 seconds.
I wish we in Manhattan turned him from Queens away at the border because we were afraid.
You should have built a wall.
We should have built a wall between Manhattan and Queens.
Yeah, guys, I love doing the show with you. Keep those member comments going. tyt.com/join to become a member. All right, what's next, John?
Okay, more fun. Wind and solar power are now cheaper in many parts of the US than coal, which is both a great development for our environment and also an opportunity for the US to be a leader in this industry. Unfortunately, here is what our leader had to say about wind power.
If Hillary got in, you wouldn't have that stat, I can tell you right now. You'd be doing windmills, and if it doesn't blow, you can forget about television for that night. Darling, I want to watch television. I'm sorry, the wind isn't blowing. I know a lot about wind.
I love how he ends. I know a lot about wind at the end because he knows a lot about everything. In fact, I'm going to show you. We're going to get back to how stupid that point was in a second. But first, I'm going to show you a clip that now this put together. It's a wonderful job of all the things that he knows about.
Nobody knows this stuff better than me.
Nobody knows more about taxes than I do and income than I do.
Nobody knows more about construction than I do.
Nobody knows more about campaign finance than I do.
I know more about drones than anybody. Nobody knows much more about technology, this type of technology certainly, than I do.
Nobody knows more about technology than me.
Nobody's in the history of this country has ever known so much about infrastructure as Donald Trump. I know the H-1B, I know the H-2B. Nobody knows it better than me.
I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me. I understand things, I comprehend very well.
We're gonna have a link down below if you're watching this later on YouTube or Facebook to the whole 2 minutes. It goes on and on and on. Great job by Now This on that. But they could add this to the lexicon. Just yesterday, he said, nobody's ever done anything more for Puerto Rico than me, ever, right?
He knows more about technology, just all of it. Like phone bevels and packaging for device, just everything.
Mark Zuckerberg? No, he doesn't know anywhere near what Donald Trump knows. All those computer coders in the Silicon Valley, they're calling Trump every once in a while. What do you think I should do with this line of code next? Okay, because he knows technology better than anybody.
Yeah, the idea that he knows more about all of these things than every other expert in the world is objectively crazier than that the leader of North Korea has never bowled less than a 300. This is crazier, but it's happening right now in our country, so we pretend it's normal.
Yeah, it's the cult of personality, and that's what all cults do. The dear leader is infallible. He knows more than everyone else combined on every single issue. And here we are with a bunch of people walking around in red hats in America going, oh, the leader knows. He knows more than everybody about me and everyone else, he's just the greatest there ever was. It's really quite pathetic, which brings us back to him knowing about wind. I mean, he does know about hot air, to be fair.
That's true.
Right. Maybe more than anyone.
You could power everybody's TV if you just put a turbine in front of his face.
Yeah, really close to his face. Really close.
So is that how it works, John?
No, that's not actually how it works. So there is a resource.
So John knows more about wind than the president?
I know a little bit about wind. So there's this website. It's run by the Department of Energy of the United States. That literally has a question. I think that this is for children, this website. It says, what happens to the electricity supply when the wind isn't blowing? Does wind need to be backed up by other sources of power generation? That second question is miles past where Trump will ever be on this. But what happens when the wind isn't blowing? Because I thought you just put the cord of your TV into the spinning turbine. No, they say, don't worry, the US power grid consists of a huge number of interconnected transmission lines that connect a variety of generation sources to loads. The wind does not always blow, and the sun doesn't always shine, which creates additional variability due to the changing output of wind and solar, and uncertainty due to the inability of perfectly forecast wind or solar output. But power grid operators have always had to deal with variability. Adding variable renewable power to the grid does not inherently change how this process of balancing electricity supply and demand works. Studies have shown that the grid can accommodate large penetrations of variable renewable power without sacrificing reliability and without the need for backup generation. They also compare the variability in these forms of energy generation with some that is experienced in more traditional fossil fuel dirty forms of energy, which also are not 100% reliable. That is the Department of Energy.
Would be great to check that next week. The same site, the same entry.
To see if it's gone and the person's been fired.
Changed it, if they've edited it.
And by the way, when they do that, and the Trump administration obviously has done that a couple of times, and that's why Michael's mentioning it. What they're doing is literal political correctness. The current Department of Energy website is factually correct, but since it offends the ignorance of our president, it might be changed like the EPA website was and several other websites were to become politically correct rather than factually correct.
Yeah. Also, just before I forget, I do want to point out, so Donald Trump has basically said that exact same thing many times now. Dear, I want to watch TV, but the wind isn't blowing. He says those exact words over and over and over. There are many things that are powered by electricity. But I do think it's noteworthy that when he talks about it, the example is always television that he's being blocked from using. That's the nightmare that he goes back to time after time, which is not random.
You know what? He might think that Jeanine Pirro was taken off by the wind.
Okay, she's not blowing anymore. Yeah.
That's why he's constantly on Twitter like, put her back on.
Right.
Get the turbines going.
Yeah, and we've got another funny semi-environment related thing in just 1 second, but let's just briefly acknowledge that while that's funny and we'll joke about this, think about how damaging it is that he is training millions or tens of millions of Americans to fundamentally think that renewable energy is a laughable idea. Not just that it's not preferable, but that you don't want it, because if you have that, it's not reliable and I might not get to watch Duck Dynasty when I want to. Like, not only is he in policy, is he de-emphasizing subsidies for renewable energy, is he adding tariffs on things like solar cells, but he's telling people to fight renewable energy at exactly the time when we don't have time to invest more in it.
So that's the serious part of it, and that's true, John. On the other hand, my favorite thing in the world is when right-wing MAGA guys think they're being clever, but betray how incredibly stupid they are. So by repeating Donald Trump, they're like, oh yeah, I was trying to watch the Young Turks, but the wind wasn't blowing, and it was at nighttime, so there was no sun. Got you. And you're like, God, that's so wonderfully embarrassing.
Yeah, it is.
So I do like to see that.
You want more embarrassing?
Yes.
Okay, so Donald Trump, he's like a good stand-up comic. He's got his go-tos and he tries out a little bit of new material at every event. And so he decided he threw a dartboard at the dictionary and he hit the Great Lakes, and then this happened.
I support the Great Lakes. Always have. They're beautiful, they're big, very deep, record deepness, right?
I mean, look, I'm telling you, there's gonna be a day, it's gonna be a day when the country is gonna be back to sanity. But it has to be a long time, like 12 years, 20 years from now, where we look back and laugh at this and go, I know, man, we were on the edge of our seat, we almost lost the country. But remember when the president was stupid enough to go on and go, hey, I like the Great Lakes. Like, who's anti-Great Lakes, right? But I don't know if you guys knew this, but they're deep, very deep.
Record deepness.
Record deepness.
Right.
Record deepness.
Yeah.
Just like his intellect.
Yeah. There's no need to actually explain factually how ridiculous what he said is there, right there.
Or that he didn't say depth.
That he didn't say depth, but we're going to. What he was talking about was the Great Lakes Renewal Initiative, which is apparently a pretty expensive ongoing project that's been funded for many years, something like a $300 million project that he in his budget proposed cutting by 90%. So it turns out he doesn't actually support the Great Lakes as much as he wants you to think.
Yeah, in fact, so the only person who doesn't support the Great Lakes is him.
Right.
And he's unbelievable. What a unreal con man. So, but get a load of the scam, and he's done this a number of times now. So the budget was 300 million, he cut it to 30 million, and then later comes out in the midst of all this and goes, you know what? I like the Great Lakes so much, I might increase that budget from 30 to 300. You're the one who cut it. You're the one who cut it.
Yeah.
And so he just did it with the Special Olympics just yesterday. They were gonna cut the entire federal portion of the budget, which is $17.6 million, and then he comes out and goes, I love the Special Olympics so much, I'm gonna fund it. I'm gonna fund the whole, I'm gonna put the money in. Yeah, it was in like a day ago before you cut it, right? Even DeBoss came out and was like, I secretly wanted it, somebody else had cut it. Gee, I wonder who that might be, right? So, and with the DACA recipients, when he's running for office, dreamers, big, beautiful dreamers, I'm in favor. Turns around, cuts the dreamers and their rights, and then goes, okay, now you're gonna have to negotiate to get the dreamers back. It's Trump 101.
Yeah.
And so, and he's playing with people's lives. And so is he gonna actually put the 300 million back? No one knows. You can't. I mean, he changes his mind every single minute, and he's making policy decisions based on how record deepness something has. You know.
Well, look. Thankfully, there's now a Democratic Congress, so he doesn't have unilateral control over what's in that budget, which is both reassuring that you actually have some people that are relatively responsible that'll be involved in that decision, but also makes some of these proposed cuts even more grotesque. Because it's one thing to cut $17 million from the Special Olympics and want to put the money somewhere else, and to actually do it and you get the money. It's another thing to propose the cut when there's no way it's gonna go through. The Democrats are never gonna allow it in the House. You know you can't get the money, but you want people to know that you wanted to cut the Special Olympics. How sick is that?
Well, he also thinks he can lie his way through anything. So
and it also makes him look strong to come back and say, I told my people that I don't want to do that. You know, I'm the one they're going to listen to, and the money, the Special Olympics aren't going anywhere, because it sort of, burnishes his image in front of his people.
Yeah, and goes along with I alone can protect you.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, having said that, that requires one layer of strategy. So that's probably not what happened.
Yeah.
They probably cut it. They're like, who cares about Special Olympics? Then they got caught and they're like, oh yeah, sure, yeah.
But he's also
I'm putting it back in. I'm telling my people.
But he's fascinated by the one-liner politics, as you know, and that was no money for disabled athletes, bad, right? And so it didn't. There was no thought about where the money was going to go, why it had been cut. Where is it? This is not what a part of this. It's just that sounds bad. It looks bad. Bad image. Change it. Right. I'll tell my people. And that's the same thing with everything. But he thinks some of these lines, like the ones about wind just now, are great for his people to hear. When he found out that Republicans also have disabled children, maybe this isn't a bad idea.
Yeah, part of the reason why they did criminal justice reform, when they thought it was largely minorities who were using drugs, they're like, lock them up, throw away the key. Oh my God, white people are hooked on painkillers and OxyContin? Hey, wait a minute, we gotta do criminal justice. Well, why are we sending these people to prison? This is crazy.
Yeah.
But to be fair to the president, he is an expert on water. Because remember,
nobody knows more about water than he does.
No, almost nobody does. Nobody does. Because remember, he's the one that deduced that Puerto Rico was an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water.
With he didn't even know that. Actually, in this hemisphere, the point of most deepness is the Puerto Rican Trench, which is in the Atlantic, and he didn't even mention
record deepness.
No, sorry. Second deepest. Deepest is the Great Lakes.
Right.
Yeah.
Which has record deepness.
Which Great Lake, Which Great Lake, Mr. President, and how many are there? Right?
That's a good point. And again, this is needless additional information that he doesn't know, that his fans won't care about. They're not the deepest lakes in the world. They're not even the deepest lakes in America. They're great. They're superior in many ways. They're not the deepest.
You
There's
just gave one away to him.
I know, I did. I shouldn't have said that. Yeah, they're not the deepest lakes.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
His crowd loves superlatives, and the one thing we are underestimating is that his crowd is just as dumb as he is. So they might think, oh yeah, well, it's obviously the record deepness, and that's obviously very important. And Donald Trump obviously is the only one that could protect the Great Lakes after he destroys the Great Lakes. And we had to destroy the village to save the village, and same thing with the Great Lakes. And they might have been actually taken aback, like, islands are surrounded by water? Man, this guy's a genius.
Right.
Like, we look at it from our perspective and go, who doesn't know that? They look at it from their perspective like, people knew that?
Right.
Let's move on to a somewhat related topic. The right wing has finally, apparently, moved on from Hillary Clinton. They have a new arch nemesis, and that is going to be revealed when Don Jr. spoke at last night's Trump rally.
Think about the fact that every mainstream leading Democratic contender is taking the advice of a freshman congresswoman who 3 weeks ago didn't know the 3 branches of government. I don't know about you guys, but that's pretty scary. You guys, you're not very nice. And neither is what that policy would do to this country.
Okay, so in just a minute, we're gonna get into this ongoing Fox News war against AOC and how it's proceeding for them. But yeah, that's the new chant. Lock her up, they've moved on a little bit. It'll come back at some point, people like oldies. But yeah, now it's AOC sucks.
Yeah, so a couple of things about this. They take advantage of the fact that their own base is so monumentally stupid that they know nothing at all. So they constantly lie to them and get away with those lies. She doesn't know the 3 branches of government. There's only one person in government that might not know the 3 branches, and I'm pretty sure it's your dad. Okay, now is there anything to back up that claim? Of course not. Preposterous, totally made up. In fact, everybody's like, well, since her questioning of Michael Cohen and some of the others and Wilbur Ross was so brilliant, obviously she must be an actress. Somebody had to have given her those lines. I mean, it was incredibly smart. So wait, I thought she was stupid. What happened?
Yeah.
Right? No, not at all. And said by, I'm not allowed to say the words anymore, but you know what Don Jr. is. I mean, this tiny.
I've thought of 20 different things that could finish that sentence.
Yes, let's put it this way: tiny intellect of Donald Trump Jr., who is so monumentally stupid that Donald Trump thinks he's an embarrassment.
Yeah.
Wow, you want to talk about record shallowness? Okay, that's Donald Trump Jr. Okay, but that's a smaller part of the story, and they drive her poll numbers down, but only among Republicans by repeating things that aren't true.
Yeah, so let's break it down, because I've seen articles all over the place. I mean, Fox News every day is another like, oh, AOC not so loved anymore, but it's basically everywhere. Let's bring up this tweet. It's gonna have some of the raw polling data. And what they're saying is that her favorable overall is 23%, or unfavorable is 36%. 38% haven't heard of her. So the headline is, oh my God, only 23% overall have a favorable opinion. Now, when you actually look at it, that number is dragged down massively by the fact that only 2% of Republicans have a favorable impression of her. And the reason it can drag it down so much is the percentage of the population that has heard of her is overly weighted towards Republicans, because Republicans are talking about her constantly, and Democrats are talking about her, but not constantly. She comes up all the time. We're gonna go through some of the actual mentions on different platforms. But she understands this. She's talked about it recently, saying it's almost as though there's a directed and concerted far-right propaganda machine with a whole cable news channel and a dark money internet operation propped up by the Mercers dedicated to maligning me and stoking national division. So she gets this campaign, and let's demonstrate how it operates over the last few months. So bring up this first graphic, you're gonna see mentions of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez per day on Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN. I mean, an average day on Fox News eclipses basically the highest ones on MSNBC and CNN, except for perhaps one or two standouts. They're talking about her all of the time. And then if you go to this next one, you're gonna see some popular right-wing tweeters, how much they talk about her. So look, Charlie Kirk, like it's almost 6% of all of his tweets about all of reality have to do with her. Daily Wire talks about her constantly. I think that's the outlet that put out the fake nude photos of her. And you're saying like Think Progress, that's not a right-wing thing. They're talking about her a good bit too, but it is heavily weighted towards right-wing media sources that are just talking about her constantly, blatantly lying about her experience. As you pointed out, she's both too smart, it's suspicious, and too dumb. She's too poor and too rich, all at the same time. She is everything you want her to be. She's the perfect boogeyman for old white male Republicans.
Oh, right, and a young woman of color. I'm sure that has nothing to do with it. All right, we'll get to why they're attacking her in a second, and the real source of their animus. But I'd like to play a similar game with, I don't know, let's take the Republican leader in the Senate. Fairly important person, Mitch McConnell. So is he overall more popular? Well, I looked it up today, okay? It turns out Mitch McConnell has a popularity of 25%. So let me, wait a minute, she has 23%, but a lot more people know Mitch McConnell than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, believe it or not. So the I don't know him number is much lower. So wait a minute, that must mean that the unpopular number is fairly high. Oh, you guessed it right. 47.8% have an unfavorable view of Mitch McConnell. So that means by about 23 points, he's unfavorable. Way worse than AOC.
And the fact is that in a practical way right now, Mitch McConnell matters more than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is a member of Congress, one of 435. He's the leader. He should be polled. You should get a poll on what people think of Mitch McConnell because he is in the political environment constantly. She's in the environment, but she's a freshman member of Congress who has only so much power. He is maybe the second most powerful man in Washington or third most powerful person in Washington. And that is an unbelievable, I would say, consensus on somebody who more people know and who matters more at the moment in Mitch McConnell. So that's fair to poll. I don't know why Quinnipiac would poll Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Look, I don't mind anyone polling anyone.
No, I don't. But Cenk, yes, I agree with you. But there is in that anybody can poll anybody. Polls are fascinating. I don't care. People who dismiss polls, I don't believe that they really don't like polls because I like looking at them. Some matter more than others. But this is a skewed poll just by the virtue of the fact that you're polling somebody looking for negatives about whom there should be no poll to begin with because, she's not running for anything right now.
No, I hear you, but she's driving the conversation. But if you were gonna do an accurate headline of this poll, you'd say the biggest category is people who don't know AOC at all. Right. Which is kind of a bit
and that's
shocking.
What I was getting to. That's what I was getting to. And the anonymity of AOC as you move forward into those numbers is really the lead, which you just said.
But again, I just want to follow up on context. So 47% of Democrats view her favorably. You might think that's not a big number. That's because a lot of Democrats still don't know her. Her unfavorable number among Democrats is only 7%. So within her own party, she has a plus 40, which is amazing, great, wonderful, okay? So how do they poll Republicans? Well, a lot more of the Republicans know her than the Democrats do. Overall, 76% of Republicans know her as opposed to 54% of Democrats, which is already amazing, right?
That's bizarre.
Right, and that's another potential headline here. And 74% find her unfavorable, 2% find her favorable. Now, is it because they're against her policies? No. Because she's, for example, wants to raise the minimum wage. Most Republicans want to raise the minimum wage. She wants to raise taxes on the rich. Actually, a majority of Republicans want to raise taxes on the rich. And you go down the line, they actually agree with her. But they didn't get a chance to look at her policies because all they have is Fox News and Don Jr., et cetera, going around going, oh, she doesn't know anything. What are we making up today? She doesn't know the three branches of government. she's gonna ban all planes. She's gonna ban all planes, right? And so people who watch Fox News who are on purpose misinformed then go, wow, I get if she's gonna ban planes, I take planes every once in a while. Unfavorable.
And that's the thing. Like Sean Hannity spent the last week with his fake outrage about hoaxes in the media. And he and his entire network have been lying persistently about banning cows and banning planes and banning milk and banning all this stuff. Donald Trump, so much of his rally was lying about what's in the Green New Deal. And they know that. First of all, it was never in the Green New Deal. And as soon as they claimed that those things were in there, we pointed out, everybody pointed out that it's not in there. That hasn't deterred them at all from saying it over and over again. So bear that in mind the next time they tell you that the media should be thinking hard about the accuracy of their statements. They are engaged in an ongoing 100% disingenuous campaign because they're worried about what she represents. Not just, as you pointed out, demographically, that she is very different from the average Fox viewer in a bunch of different ways, but there is every reason to believe that she is the vanguard for a whole new crop of eventual congressmen and women that are going to be strong progressives just like her. And they're going to advocate for the actual values and policies the American people want.
So that leads me to the final points about why it is that they're attacking her in the first place. And remember, it's not just them. John had a really good tweet, which Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez actually retweeted and added to, about how the Democratic establishment doesn't much like her either. And a lot of the establishment media doesn't much like her either. Imagine what your favorability would be if the entirety of the establishment and the right wing were against you. And despite that, she is enormously popular within her own party. And obviously Donald Trump told his Twitter followers are everything. In fact, he told Michael Shure that famously in 2012 when Michael asked him, well, I mean, she's got more than almost the rest of Congress combined. That might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but not by much.
I don't think it's an exaggeration.
Yeah, okay.
There's still 2, did she pass Nancy Pelosi?
3.75 million is what she has. Anyway, but now to the most important part. Look, they're all attacking her because she's the one that's actually trying to do something. She's the one who's proposing legislation, who's fighting for progressive values. Those progressive values are really popular in the country, 70% for Medicare for all, 80% for Green New Deal. So they're in a panic. That is why they are attacking this freshman congresswoman unabated. They have attacked, Fox News has covered her more than every presidential candidate except Elizabeth Warren. So whoever they see as a threat, they attack day in, day out. We got to drive their numbers down because they're not a news organization, they're a political propaganda organization. So they're trying to drive the numbers down because they know that the policies, one, she's a fighter, so she could actually beat them. And two, her policies are incredibly popular. And I think it's actually an embarrassment to the whole Democratic Party that they were sitting around doing almost nothing. So when someone walks into Congress at the age of 29 and actually proposes something, that the entire Republican Party is like, oh my God, we actually have an opponent. They're like shocked by it. They're like, oh, this one fights back. We have to hurry up and all attack at the same time. We've got a live one, which we haven't had in decades in the Democratic Party.
But the Republicans have been very good at picking that person. It's been Nancy Pelosi before, it's been Hillary Clinton before, it was Bill Clinton before that. So there's a little bit that's out of the playbook too, that isn't, and I'm not arguing about the merits of AOC here, but I'm just saying this is out of the Republican playbook, that these are not go-along people. They're the ones that are challenging us. And they've been women each time that the Republicans have really put that picture out there. I mean, it didn't work as well with Bill Clinton, but it certainly worked with Hillary, and it certainly worked at different times with Nancy Pelosi. It didn't work that last year, but I think there's a big part of it that's that too, Cenk.
Yeah, and this time we fight back. So they're definitely not going to get away with it. And finally, does anybody think if Joe Crowley had won, that they'd be chanting "Joe Crowley sucks" at these rallies? My guess is Joe Crowley would have gone back to doing absolutely nothing. And no, there would have been no bold proposals. There would have been no real fight on behalf of progressives. And Fox News would have been perfectly satisfied and nobody would be chanting. They might do some political attacks on Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and whoever else they perceive to be a threat. But we've actually finally got people who are willing to fight for us. And Fox News is, I think, completely afraid of that, which is wonderful. All right, we got to take a quick break. We've got a lot more where that came from.
We actually have that fight against Elizabeth Warren after this.
That's right. So Elizabeth Warren takes on the bankers. The Koch brothers take her on. It's a free-for-all. We'll break it down for you when we come back.